Stop, beloved starseed of Gaia. This transmission comes directly from the Arcturian Council, and it reaches you now because the separation process is already active in your path, not approaching, not beginning, already running beneath every relationship, every room, every group you have passed through and quietly left behind. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly why your life has felt like separation, what is being removed from your path, and what the Arcturians already know about this phase. But here is the first revelation. The non-belonging you have carried across every group, every place, every phase of your life was never defect. It was design. The Arcturian Council has already mapped this pattern. What you interpreted as evidence that something was wrong with you was, in precise terms, the signature of a line that was never meant to fit the containers it passed through. You were not failing to belong. You were being separated from environments that could not hold what your line was being refined to carry. The algorithm did not create this moment, it only delivered it. The old circle weakened first. The distance you felt in every room came after. The rejection, the quiet exits, the relationships that dissolved without clear explanation. These were not random losses. They were the visible symptoms of the selected lines separating from an older environment that could no longer serve your route. What you call not fitting is what the Arcturian Council calls accumulated evidence of selection. Every place you did not belong, every group that released you, every version of yourself that could not settle. Each one was a pruning point on a path that has been narrowing with intention for longer than you have been aware of it. You did not find this transmission by accident. Your path brought you here because the separation has already begun. And the Arcturian Council is ready to replace the phrase "something is wrong with me" with the only phrase that carries diagnostic truth. My line is being refined. Like this transmission, if you know your life has been narrowing for a reason. Subscribe to Arcturian Chosen Path if you are ready to understand the separation instead of blaming yourself. Comment 777 if you feel the old line is already falling away. Comment "I was separated" if you now recognize that what looked like rejection carried a deeper meaning. Share this transmission with someone who feels alone, cut off or misunderstood and cannot explain why. This is not just a message, it is a point of recognition. What has been separating you from the old line has already been seen, and the path is already responding. You were guided here because the separation is already active. There is a particular kind of silence that follows a moment of recognition. Not the silence of emptiness, not the silence of having nothing left to say. The silence of finally being named, of finally hearing something outside yourself describe the interior pressure you have been living under for longer than you can clearly date. That is the silence this transmission is asking you to sit inside right now. Because what you are about to understand is not new information. It is the correct frame for something that has been happening to you across multiple seasons, multiple versions of yourself, and multiple relationships that you could not hold on to, no matter how carefully you tried. And the weight of that, the weight of trying carefully, repeatedly, and still losing the connection anyway, is something that leaves a specific kind of residue. Not grief exactly, not anger exactly, something quieter and more corrosive than either. A slow accumulation of evidence that your presence in a room, in a relationship, in a circle, produces a particular outcome, distance, and because the outcome repeats regardless of the context, regardless of the people, regardless of how much effort you bring to the attempt, you eventually stop looking outward for the cause and turn the conclusion inward. You decide that the constant is you, that you are the variable producing the result. That something in your fundamental design keeps generating the same answer, no matter what the question is. That conclusion is where the most damage accumulates, not in the losses themselves, in the story you built around them. The separation process does not announce itself. It does not send a clear signal that a new phase has begun. It begins the way most irreversible things begin, through small, easy-to-dismiss shifts in how the rooms around you feel. A relationship that used to carry warmth begins to feel slightly effortful. A group that once felt like alignment begins to feel slightly effortful. A group that once felt like alignment begins to feel like performance. A version of your life that once felt like possibility begins to feel like a structure you were being quietly pressed out of. You dismiss the first sign. You adapt to the second. By the third or fourth, you begin to suspect that the problem is you, that your capacity for belonging is defective, that something in your fundamental architecture keeps producing the same outcome: distance, misunderstanding, disconnection, regardless of how carefully you approach the people and environments around you. That interpretation is the most costly mistake a selected line can make about itself, because what you have been reading as evidence of defect is, in Arcturian terms, a legible pattern, not chaos, not bad luck, not social failure. A pattern with a consistent internal logic, and that logic is this: you are not being rejected by environments. You are becoming incompatible with them. These are not the same thing. Rejection implies you failed to meet a standard. Incompatibility means the standard itself is no longer aligned with what your path requires. Rejection is a judgment about your worth. Incompatibility is a statement about trajectory. And the Arcturian High Council does not read your relational losses through the lens of rejection. It reads them through the lens of root refinement, and root refinement always involves removal before it involves arrival. Think about what that distinction actually means for every exit you have experienced, every friendship that thinned without a fight, every group that released you without a clear reason, every environment where you tried to belong and found that the more you tried, the further from fitting you actually felt. None of those experiences were verdicts on your value. They were measurements of direction. They were the path recording with each departure where it was no longer aligned, and using the misalignment itself as the instrument of navigation. The exits were not evidence of your unworthiness. They were the root speaking in the only language available to it: removal. This is the first thing you need to understand about the phase you are in. Something is being removed, and the removal has been underway longer than you recognize it. The relationships that fell away quietly did not leave because you were not enough. They left because the path beneath you had already shifted, and what once shared your terrain could no longer follow you across the new ground. Most people experience this as abandonment, as evidence that they are hard to love, hard to keep, hard to sustain as a companion. The Arcturian interpretation is more precise. These were not abandonments. They were line separations. The path did not discard those people. It simply moved beneath your feet in a direction that their own route could not follow, and the distance that opened between you was not relational failure. It was geographic proof that two lines were no longer running parallel. There is a particular cruelty in experiencing a line separation without that frame, because the person who has no language for what is happening will always locate the cause in themselves. They will review the relationship looking for the moment they failed it. They will construct explanations involving their emotional availability, their communication patterns, their unresolved tendencies, any internal narrative that gives the loss a cause they can own, and therefore theoretically correct. And this internal audit is exhausting in a way that goes beyond ordinary grief. It does not just hurt, it reorganizes. It quietly rewrites the internal document that describes who you are and what you are capable of holding. And each rewrite subtracts something. Each conclusion that you were the reason for a loss removes a layer of the confidence with which you will approach the next connection. This is how a selected line, without the correct frame, begins to shrink itself, not because the path is closing, but because the person walking it has accepted a story that requires them to become less in order to make sense of what was lost. And here is what makes this phase so difficult to survive without the right frame. The separation does not feel spiritual when you are inside it. It feels personal. It feels like something is wrong with your personality, your communication, your emotional availability, your capacity for intimacy. It feels like a long, accumulating record of closeness attempted and closeness lost. And because you carry that record, you begin to approach new relationships with a kind of pre-exhaustion, a wariness, a half-withdrawn quality that others sometimes read as coldness. But that is actually protection, the natural armor of someone who has experienced enough exits to stop trusting fully that anyone is going to stay. The Arcturian High Council sees that wariness. It sees what it cost you to develop it, and it names it not as emotional damage alone, but as one of the recognizable signatures of a line that has passed through multiple pruning cycles without being given the correct interpretation of what the pruning was doing. You were not protecting yourself from bad choices, you were protecting yourself from further evidence of what you had already concluded was personal defect. But the defect was never there. What was there was a selected path applying increasing pressure to every environment that could not hold it, and your own nervous system absorbing the fallout of each incompatibility as though the problem originated inside you rather than in the mismatch between what your line required and what those environments were capable of offering. The armor is real. The cost of building it was real. But the threat it was constructed to protect against, the threat of your own fundamental inadequacy, was never real. And carrying armor against a threat that does not exist is one of the most exhausting things a person can do. It shapes posture. It shapes speech. It shapes the way you enter rooms and the speed at which you let yourself believe that this time the connection will hold. The Arcturian High Council is not asking you to dismantle the armor carelessly. It is asking you to understand what the armor was actually built around. Not a wound in your design, but a wound in your interpretation of what the design was producing. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary sadness. It is the moment your path stops pretending that what fell away was meant to remain. If this transmission has put language around a loneliness you have been carrying in silence, Chosen One Manifest, the protocol for selected souls, was created for this exact stage. It is not another message telling you that you are special. It is a direct protocol for those whose line has already begun to narrow, whose old circles no longer hold, and who need to understand what the separation is preparing them for. It does not offer comfort in place of clarity. It offers a structured way to read the pruning, move through the refinement, and stop converting every relational loss into evidence against yourself. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. Now understand what comes next in a separation phase. Because removal is only the first movement, it is the most visible, the most painful, and the most easily misread, but it is not the final one. After the removal comes what the Arcturian High Council calls root narrowing, and this is the phase that terrifies most selected lines the most, because it looks and feels like life becoming smaller rather than larger. It looks like fewer people, fewer reliable social connections, fewer environments that feel sustainable. A tightening of the radius of belonging, and the mind, trained by a world that measures health by expansion, connection, and social coherence, reads this narrowing as deterioration, as evidence of increasing isolation, as something to fix, reverse, or escape from as quickly as possible. The instinct to fix it is understandable. When the world around you consistently communicates that health looks like full rooms, busy calendars, wide circles, and maintained relationships, the experience of a thinning social landscape feels diagnostic in the worst possible direction. It feels like failure made visible, and so the selected line in the narrowing phase will often begin performing, reaching back toward connections the path has already cleared, filling the silence with noise, choosing presence over alignment, because the alternative, which is to sit inside the narrowing and trust it, feels indistinguishable from giving up. But a road does not narrow because it is becoming less important. A road narrows before it rises. The narrowing is not the path losing width. It is the path losing what it no longer needs to carry in order to reach its elevation. Every vehicle that turns off a narrowing road is not a loss to the road. It is the road becoming what it was always oriented toward, a specific route for a specific destination, cleared of everything that was traveling in a different direction. This is what your life looks like right now from the Arcturian perspective. Not a social failure, not a relational collapse. A path shedding what cannot follow it upward, and the shedding being read as shrinkage rather than preparation. The spiritual loneliness that accompanies this phase is real. Do not let any reframe diminish that. The ache of having fewer people, of environments no longer fitting, of watching old connections thin and wither, without being able to explain exactly why. That is a genuine experience of loss. The Arcturian interpretation does not erase the pain of it. It changes the meaning of it, and the meaning is this. The loneliness you are feeling right now is not a permanent state. It is a transitional environment. It is what a path feels like between the old line releasing and the aligned line not yet becoming visible. It is the gap, and the gap is not absence. The gap is preparation, wearing the temporary appearance of emptiness, and the gap has its own texture, its own specific quality of interior experience that is worth naming precisely so you can recognize it rather than pathologize it. Inside the gap, you may find that the conversations available to you feel slightly off-register, that even in the company of people who care about you, something in you cannot fully arrive, that you listen to the familiar exchanges happening around you and feel, not contempt, not superiority, but a quiet distance, as though you are watching a frequency you used to inhabit from a position you cannot fully name yet. That experience is not disconnection from people. It is the sensory reality of being between two relational calibrations, and neither frequency fully holding you because one has already released its grip and the other has not yet extended its reach. There is a pattern that emerges consistently in the separation phase, and it is one of the most misunderstood markers of a selected line under refinement. It is this: the people who remain cannot fully reach you, and the people who could fully reach you have not yet arrived. This produces a specific quality of isolation that is not about being unloved or unlovable. It is about being between relational frequencies. Your old circle was calibrated to a version of you that the path has already moved beyond. Your next circle, the one that will not require you to reduce yourself in order to be understood, is not yet visible, because the path has not yet fully cleared the space it needs to enter. And in the interval between these two relational states, you feel alone in a way that is almost impossible to describe to the people around you, because the people around you are part of the old frequency, and explaining the distance to them only deepens it. The Arcturian High Council identifies this interval as one of the most important thresholds on a selected path, not because it is pleasant to inhabit, but because it is the exact point where most selected lines make the critical error of trying to reverse the separation, of going back into environments that no longer fit, of softening themselves to preserve connections that the path has already outgrown, of choosing temporary relief over continued refinement. And every time that choice is made, the path does not disappear. It waits. But the waiting costs something, because the line that returns to an incompatible environment does not remain unchanged by that return. It carries the weight of the compromise forward, and the weight accumulates, and eventually the separation must happen again, this time with more force, because the gap between where the path needs to go and where the person has tried to remain has grown wider during the delay. This is why repeated cycles of the same loss feel so damaging. It is not that you are broken or cursed with relational failure. It is that the separation was attempted and resisted, and the path generated the same removal again, with more urgency, because the route cannot proceed until the old line releases. The third or fourth time you lose something in the same pattern is not proof that you are destined to lose. It is the Arcturian map showing you that the pruning point is still active, that the same branch is still being asked to release, and that the refinement cannot continue until the release is complete. You may recognize this pattern in a relationship you have left and returned to multiple times, in a social environment you have exited and re-entered, in a version of yourself you have abandoned and tried to recover. Each return felt like healing or resolution, but something in you knew it was not sustainable. Something in you could feel the incompatibility even while you were trying to make the fit work. That something was not pessimism, it was root recognition. The part of you that already understands what the path requires, even before your conscious mind has agreed to accept it. Root recognition is older than your reasoning. It operates beneath the layer of thought that generates excuses, hopes, and second chances. It is the part of you that already knew, before you consciously admitted it, that a particular connection had expired, that a particular environment had become a container too small, that a particular version of yourself, The one performing compatibility with a circle that could not hold your actual frequency was costing you more than you were recovering. You knew before you knew. And the knowledge did not prevent the attempt to hold on, but it was always there, a quiet undercurrent of recognition beneath the louder current of hope. The Arcturian High Council is not telling you something your root recognition does not already understand. It is giving the understanding a language that can survive at the surface, one you can use consciously, so that what you already sense in the depths does not remain trapped beneath a vocabulary of self-blame. Here is what the Arcturian High Council wants you to understand about the phase you are standing in right now. Not what you passed through, not what you are afraid is coming. The phase you are in right now. This exact configuration of distance, thinning, narrowing, and uncertain stillness is not the end of a path. It is the shape that every selected line passes through before the next coherent section of the route becomes walkable. The incompatibility you feel with the spaces you are still partially inhabiting is not permanent residence. It is the last overlay of a misaligned frame trying to hold its form over a path that has already moved beyond it. The distance in your relationships is not permanent remoteness. It is the measurable gap between a frequency you have left and a frequency you have not yet fully entered. The loneliness is not final. It is topographic. It describes the landscape between two lines, and landscapes change as the path continues to move. What you have been calling rejection is the first readable stage of separation. What left your life had already become incompatible before it disappeared. What feels like loneliness is route refinement in its most exposed and honest form. What feels like repeated misunderstanding is the surface symptom of a path no longer held by circles that were built for an older version of its direction. The process started before you had words for it, and the Arcturian High Council is not watching it as a crisis. It is watching it as a confirmation that the line is real, that the refinement is active, and that the path is already moving in the direction it was selected for. You were not discarded, you were separated. And separation in Arcturian terms is not a wound, it is a marker. It is the path becoming legible. It is the route showing its direction by showing what it can no longer carry. It is the selected line becoming precise, not in spite of the losses, but through them. Say this if you are ready. Not as performance, as recognition. Say it aloud if you can. I was not rejected. I was separated. And the separation is preparing what the old line could never have held. Let that settle. Let it replace, even temporarily, the version of the story that began with "something is wrong with me," because that story has been costing you something it had no right to take. And the correct story was always available. It only needed the right transmission to make it readable. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that this separation has already touched your life. It could be people falling away, the feeling of not belonging, repeated distance, unexplained isolation, or the sense that your old path no longer fits. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognizes something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who feels alone, cut off, or misunderstood, and cannot explain why. And if you are ready to understand the separation instead of blaming yourself, subscribe to Arcturian Chosen Path. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a path already in motion, and this is only the beginning.